The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So we got the Olympics underway. The baseball trade deadline is a week from today. We got the Orioles floundering. What are they going to do at the deadline? Looks like the Nationals are going to be sellers, dominated again by the Padres yesterday. Oh, that's fine. And that's stuff to talk about. But Lord, football has taken over, and it will dominate until we get to February, and even after February, after the Super Bowl. It's really remarkable how they chew up all the news, and the television ratings indicate that that's what people watch. Not that other sports are suffering on television. I'll get to some of the rights deals. A lot of news coming out yesterday regarding the NBA and the WNBA. But it's football, 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 and Commanders are getting ready. As a matter of fact, they're probably out on the field right now as they go into day 2, and we'll get to comments from yesterday from Dan Quinn and Terry McLaurin and John Allen, the two oldsters on the team. They've seen a lot of changes, and they're talking about the latest changes. Dan Quinn said today, and he had a little news conference before they went out on the field, that he was happy with the energy yesterday. He's going to be very positive. I think if things are not going well, we're not necessarily going to hear about it, but it's a honeymoon phase, and we've had a lot of honeymoon phases over the years. Even Jim Zorn got a honeymoon phase. So it's going to be a while before the heat gets turned up on Dan Quinn, but he seems to be saying all the right things, seems to have a very good relationship with the media, seems to be honest about things. So good for him, and a good feel coming out of Ashburn as we roll into day 2 today. Now, let's start with what we did yesterday, and this news actually broke while we were doing the show, and I wouldn't say it's earth-shattering news, but it's somewhat of a surprise, because the reason that Johnny Newton, who's a big tackle from Illinois, the reason he slipped to the second round was that he had a foot injury, and he had to have foot surgery. And not only that, see, this is what makes this an even bigger deal, was that he had foot surgery on one foot, and then he had it on the other. So he had surgery in May to repair what they call a Jones fracture in the left foot, just after he had had the surgery to recover from a partial fracture in the right foot. So he's coming off 2 bad feet, didn't participate in any of the off-season workouts or the mini camp, but he was there. His foot was in a boot, and he was riding a bicycle. And going into camp the day before it started, Dan Quinn said, we're going to put him on the physically unable to perform list and get him back when he's ready to go, but not before he's ready. And then yesterday, as they're getting ready to take the field for the first day of practice, Quinn says, hey, guess what? He's active.
He's so ready to go. He's got such a prove-it mentality to him that what it's assuring is that there's no missteps along the way. We're hopeful that he could get back soon, and so to have it now and all the night walkthroughs and all the install that goes with that, that's a big deal. And so we're really pumped that he's able to start with us. He's really worked hard at it.
Not ready to go. F.A. Abada, who was hurt late last season, still recovering from a knee injury. So, they got all the rookies on the field, which is good. And he also said yesterday that they were practicing the red zone and intend to do it again today. This is the reason why.
Twofold. One, from we thought there would be better player safety than the long running of the first part to go. Secondly, things happen much more quickly. The route, the field, the locations, where it goes. So seeing that type of communication early, we thought that would be a good way to just go. There's scramble plays that happen down in the red zone. So it's such an important part of what we do. We didn't want to wait.
Everybody knows what the red zone is. It wasn't that long ago where we didn't use that term. Now we have a whole channel called the red zone channel, meaning when teams get in the 20-yard line, or supposedly, they fill it with other stuff too, but that's where they go from game to game to game. I just, I'm amazed at terms that become like so commonplace. Like they're as easy to understand now as touchdown or safety or incompletion. So, they practiced the red zone yesterday. They're practicing again today. And overall, this is a wide outlook from Dan Quinn. He has said that this is a recalibration not a rebuild. But it's clearly a rebuild. Look, they overhauled the roster. The opening news conference, when they introduced Adam Peters as the general manager, David Aldridge of The Athletic asked about the current roster. And there was a pause big enough to drive a truck through from Peters. And he gave some answer something like, I don't even remember what he said, but it was a non-answer. And sure enough, as soon as free agency opened, they were incredibly active. Didn't sign any big names, didn't go after the Albert Hainsworths of the world like in the old days, but they brought in a bunch of veterans who, weren't big money guys, but they come from winning organizations, and they can be, leadership for the younger players and placeholders until their spots are filled with draft picks. And that's what's going to happen in the years to come. They're going to load up on draft picks, and they're going to try and develop players behind them. So there's that. But there's also a winning culture that Quinn wants to instill. Nobody really believes that they're going to be a contender this year, and even a long shot just to make the playoffs. So, he's looking at this in terms of the short term, getting a culture in place that can help them in the long term, and here's how he explained it.
Yeah, I'm not the best on patience. I'll say that. Because somebody asked me over the summer, rebuild, and that feels like real estate to me. That's why I said recalibrate. It's not a rebuilding. We're not buying an old house. It's how quickly can we get to become good at so many different parts of our football. So I'm just the opposite of patience, to be honest with you. I wanted urgency in all that we're doing, but it takes a lot of prep behind the scenes to go out and execute, because if the execution and the communication is not game-like, how could you perform in the game well if you're not pushing those standards out on the practice field? So out here, it should be as competitive and game-like as we can while taking care of one another. But as far as down patience to go, that's not part of what I talk to the team about at all.
Yeah, and why would you? Because, it's like when Chuck Noll took over as coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1969. They were terrible. I think they'd won one game the year before. And he said to the players, nothing against you guys personally, but most of you aren't going to be here because we're going to replace you with better players. And that's not really the case here, although it is to some degree. It's more of he's trying to establish a culture of winning so that when new guys come in, they fit right in. I mean, we've heard so much in the last 4 years of Ron Rivera saying how he changed the culture. He really didn't. And it was an impossible situation with Dan Snyder and all the storm that was going on outside the organization. I mean, he didn't help himself any by bringing Ryan Vermillion in, his trainer from Carolina, who got investigated by the DEA and avoided jail time with a plea bargain. So there were his distractions too. But what Quinn is trying to establish is guys doing things the right way and getting a team that communicates well together, and that as players are replaced, they come into a system that's very good. See, that's what you want. That's the kind of thing that they have to establish. All this nonsense about culture change the last 4 years didn't happen. It may not happen here, but they're working on it, and I think they're doing it in the proper way. This is about the long-term expectations, what you expect to do, how many – nobody's talking about how many wins you're going to have, but, how long is it going to take before this is a contending team? This was his answer on that.
Number one, the expectations I don't really talk about other than, there's going to be a lot of winning here that's done. And you can't put the winning before the standards and the championship habits that you create together. And so that's what this time is for. So in all that we do, I expect to see championship standards, the way we meet, the way we practice, the way we communicate. When those things take place, the winning goes. So as far as the expectations, I'm hopeful that every time you and our families and friends watch us play, so these guys absolutely bring it. And that part of our energy, if we get that right, and championship standards and the execution, the wins will take care of themselves. But there's so many things right now that I want to get accomplished with identity. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, it's way too early to talk about wins and losses. And this is an unusual organization. Some places that you might go where they're not that far removed from winning, people have higher expectations. Like, look, when Norv Turner came here in 1994, they were only 1 year removed from being a playoff team. Joe Gibbs last year, 1992, they made the playoffs as a wild card and won a game at Minnesota before being eliminated by the 49ers in San Francisco. The following year, Richie Pettibone went 4-12. When Norv Turner walked in here in 1994, that was a complete rebuild. Free agency was in. The old veterans had to go. But the expectation was that Norv would have this team back on track in a year or two. And that didn't happen. Finally, in his sixth year, I guess, was it 6th year? Yeah, 6th year, they finally made the playoffs. They finally won the division and got fired in his 7th year with a winning record by Dan Snyder in what was a preview of what was to come over the next 20 years plus. Aaron Rodgers, always smarter than everybody else. So finally, the Jets have opened up training camp. He, as you know, missed the mandatory mini camp for the Jets. He was at the OTAs, but missed the mandatory mini camp to go on a trip to Europe. And he reportedly was fined $100,000 for that, which, I guess in his world is not a lot of money. But this was his explanation as to why he planned a trip to Europe when they had this 3-day mini camp scheduled for the Jets.
Yeah, I originally scheduled it based on the previous year's schedule, which had us out, I believe, by the 9th or 10th. So once I saw the schedule, I was trying to move some things around. It just didn't happen. Back in some of the doldrums of the rehab, I thought it'd be fun to put together a trip with some friends, and we wanted to plan it kind of middle of June. Looked at the previous year's schedule and felt like I was going to be safe.
Considering your participation throughout the spring, were you surprised at the reaction from people that you weren't there those 2 days of mandatory?
Well, it's like I said on Big Cat's podcast, they're OTA days. They happen to be labeled as minicamp. It's not the same as it was in 2005 or 2010. The schedule is an OTA day. It's labeled as minicamp, so you can try and get anybody who hasn't been around to be there. Yeah, I had a great talk with Robert. Obviously, he wanted me to be there, and I knew the consequences if I wasn't going to be there. The reaction is what it is.
Did you get fined?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if they're going to make him pay the fine because he pretty much runs the team. By the way, it was Egypt where he went, not Europe. Both start with an E. But, yeah, he was in Egypt there. Now, I know what you're thinking about this, and I know what I'm thinking about this. Amy Trask is a former executive with the Raiders. She's thinking probably what you're thinking and what I'm thinking.
The thing that bothered me the most, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of having been with the team, and then just from the perspective of a human being. He said he looked at the schedule and he figured based on last year, I should be okay if I plan it right. How about picking up the phone? Or if you don't want to talk, texting or emailing, or do it as a DM on Instagram or a X and asking the organization, hey, I'm planning a trip. These are the days I'm targeting. Am I clear to go? It's called communication. He made his plan and he said, I thought, looking at last year's schedule, I'd be okay. Why didn't you contact the team and say, hey, I'm planning a trip with friends. These are the days I'm eyeing. Am I okay? One of three things could have happened. The team could have said, no, you're not okay. We've got a camp then, or mini camp then. Pick another day. He could have picked another day or said, screw it. I'm going to stick with these days. Or the team could have said, you know what? We don't have dates that are hard yet. Let us know your dates and we'll plan around them. Absolute failure to communicate.
No question. And it's 2024. This isn't a time when people didn't have answering machines. Remember the days, maybe you're not old enough to remember this, but there was a time where you could say, yeah, I tried to call you, couldn't get a hold of you. Not the case now. As she said, send a text, send an email, leave a message. No, he didn't do that because he's just smarter than everybody else. And I love the fact that, he quotes himself from the Big Cat podcast. Oh, please. Look, he's 40 years old. He played only 4 plays last year. He's at an age where guys can fall off the table quickly. And there's no guarantee that he's going to be the MVP Aaron Rodgers this year. I assume he'll stay healthy, but as you get older, you become more and more brittle and you get hurt. I don't think he's Tom Brady in the way that Brady amazingly kept his body in the kind of condition where he rarely got hurt late in his career. But, to act like it's a great privilege to have you around. And, oh, yeah, I looked at the schedule from last year and I thought, okay, I'll just do. It doesn't take any time to send a text to Robert, as he calls him, his head coach, and say, hey, Robert, I'm planning this trip to Egypt. And, is this going to be okay? Are these dates going to be okay? And maybe even Robert says, well, yeah, go ahead and do it, and we'll just move the camp up a few days right before you leave. No, because it's Aaron Rodgers, and he wants to run the show. He's in charge. And they got the Jets falling all over themselves for this guy. He better be able to perform because there's a lot riding on this, and the Jets have a great team around him. They didn't have a quarterback last year. Zach Wilson was terrible, and they got a lot of heat for not having a better backup behind Aaron Rodgers. So Aaron Rodgers better be Aaron Rodgers if you want to behave this way. If you want to act like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, sorry, my bad. Yeah, looked at last year's schedule and, planned the trip. What could I do? No, Amy Trask is 100% right. Make a phone call, send a text, send an email. Send a direct message on Twitter. However you want to do it, communicate because it's instantaneous now. Those days of I tried to call you and couldn't get a hold of you doesn't wash anymore. Doesn't work. Just does not work. So Aaron Rodgers may be old enough to remember that, although I don't think he lived at a time when we didn't have at least message machines on phones. But, my bad. I scheduled at the wrong time. Okay, so what? All right, coming up, more football yak. Albert Breer from SI.com on when we can expect to have the 18-game schedule, which now seems more likely than not. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
A couple of training camp updates outside of Ashburn. Owings Mills, you may have heard about Lamar Jackson missing the first 3 days of Ravens training camp with some type of an illness. He showed up, I think, for day one, and they sent him home. He missed another day, and then he was out there yesterday and only lasted an hour. He looked, as they say, weary, walking across the field to the team facility, not feeling well. They haven't really given any update on what exactly the problem is, but they are, giving you the old, it's early in camp, don't worry, he's a veteran, so forth and so on. We're going to work him back in for sure. Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken said with a smile, like, yeah, we're going to play him. He says, I know I'm kind of being a smartass. You have to ask him how he feels, but he was great in the meetings, and we were on the field at the start of the practice, and he said he wasn't feeling good. The Ravens have had to deal with him being sick in the past, so I guess it's better that it happens now than right before a huge game. But kind of concerning about that Lamar is dealing with an illness. And we'll get to later in the show, ESPN has put out the top 25 players of this century, of the 21st century. And Lamar Jackson has 2 MVPs, but he's not among the top 25. And the other day, in defending him against some of the criticism that's out there on social media and other places, John Harbaugh, the coach, said, we expect him to become the best player in the history of the NFL. Whoa. And he may get there, but he's got a long way to go. And, not surprisingly, the greatest player of the 21st century and maybe the greatest player in the history of the game, Tom freaking Brady. So we'll get to that list coming up. Also, that Brandon Ayuk has reported for the 49ers. He had said he wanted to be traded. There was reason to believe that he was going to hold out. He's doing, and I guess this is a new term in the NFL. I guess this is how things evolve. He is doing what they call a hold-in. He has reported to camp for the 49ers, but he's not participating in any drills. Doesn't want to get hurt and jeopardize his long-term contract. He's due $14 million. I guess he's collecting that. I guess he can't dock him pay if he shows up, but he's not working out. But not there is Trent Williams. And Trent Williams has a contract. He's got 3 years left on a 6-year deal that he signed for $138 million. He's since fallen behind in the top-paid offensive lineman, and I guess you could make the case that Trent Williams is the best offensive lineman in the league. But Christian Darrisaw of Minnesota is making $28 million a year. Penei Sewell of the Lions, $28 million. Laramie Tunsil, $25 million a year. And Williams is considered the best in pass blocking in the NFL, but at $23 million a year, he's $5 million short of Christian Darrisaw, so he wants something to be done about his contract. He does not have guaranteed money beyond this season, so I guess they're working to get that straightened out. He's 36 years old, and you know he was famous here for playing hurt. He would go through these injuries and you know kind of limp through it. A tough guy and still a great player. But, you know, are the 49ers going to – I guess it's just a bookkeeping thing, and they'll be able to work it out. But he is not there in training camp. And, you know, maybe at 36 years old and the way he plays, he doesn't really have to be there at that point. But, you know, there's been a lot of drama around Trent Williams, not just in San Francisco, but when he was here. And he managed to get himself out of here thanks to some real mismanagement of his situation by Bruce Allen. There you go. All right, let me get to Albert Breer of SI.com, frequently a guest on the Dan Patrick Show. We've spent some time this week talking about the 18-game schedule, which it was reported in the Post the other day that there are discussions going on between the Players Association and the league. Now, there's a collective bargaining agreement that runs through 2030. So there's time left, and it would take reopening that to get this 18-game schedule in place. Given that both sides seem open to it happening and that there's going to be more money for the players if they do it, it would seem that's going to happen. Is it going to happen in 1 year or 2 years or beyond that? A little timetable here from Breer as he talked to Dan Patrick about it yesterday.
I think the key is there's an opt-out. I believe it's after 2029 in the broadcast deals. So, like, to me, and you know how this stuff works, Dan, like I think they'd want to have this in place before then. So when they're negotiating with the networks and the streaming services and everybody else, they're negotiating with a bigger piece of real estate than they have right now. So my feeling is that they would probably want to get this in place before negotiating the new broadcast deals, assuming they'll opt out. And based on what we just saw the NBA get, I'd say there's probably a 99% chance out of 100 that they do opt out after 2029. As for what it's going to take to get 18 games, I want to be really clear about this. The players cannot bargain away like off-season program stuff or anything like that owners don't care about anymore. I mean, I think it's just like the owners view those as opportunities to shut the lights out and not pay bills for another 3 or 4 weeks. You know what I mean? Like they have to get the owners where it hurts. And I think one of the ways they can do that is to find a way to get guys paid faster. And if I'm the players, what I'm looking at is I'm saying I want loosening of the rules on franchise tags, where you make it harder to franchise tag a guy. I'm not saying get rid of them, but make it harder to franchise tag a guy, right? And then I want guys to get to free agency earlier. Now the problem with this stuff sometimes can be that the older players control the negotiation. So the older players might be less concerned with a guy getting to free agency after 3 years instead of 4. But the reality is guys getting to free agency faster, guys getting paid faster is going to help everybody. It's going to push the market every which way. It's going to, I think really impact the chance that they eventually get to more fully guaranteed contracts. So I think it has to be something like that. It has to be some measure of control over the workforce that you're taking away from the owners. And I think, the ways that you do that is, you find a way to make it easier for guys to get to free agency, both through the numbers of years of service it takes to get there, and by maybe tearing down some of the walls that the franchise tags create to star players getting there.
That's Albert Breer of SI.com. Dan Patrick on the timetable for an 18-game schedule. A couple of things. One, on the guaranteed deals, the owners really don't want to do that. They've done everything they possibly can to prevent that from happening. And given, that a player's career can end on any play, do you want to, I guess you can look at baseball and Steven Strasburg, and the Nationals were on the hook for $240 million, and they got like 30 innings out of that deal, and they've had to eat that money. But, in football, there could be like 3 Strasburgs on your team, especially if one of them is the starting quarterback. So they're going to resist that, I think, as much as possible. Also, what he's suggesting there is shortening the amount of time that you can get to your second contract. They want to avoid the second contract as much as they can. Now, there's just so much money now that's gushing into the league from not just the existing television deals that they have in place, but the streaming deals that they're making. And that's where everything is going. I'm going to talk a little bit later on about the NBA situation and how they're looking more towards streaming than cable now. Cable is dying quickly. And what's being done is they're making a move towards the future, which you have to do. I mean, the smart people don't look at the now, they look at the future, and that's where the future is in streaming. So the NFL probably doing the same thing, probably looking more and more towards Peacock, Amazon, things like that. And so that's why, the 2019 window that he's talking about where they can opt out of the broadcast deals is so important. 2029, I should say, not 2019. I mean, I think that Albert Breer is 100% correct on that they'll have to do it before then so that they'll have some certainty. But I don't know if the players are going to be able to get all that they want. And one thing we've learned about the NFL is the players are interchangeable. Stars retire, stars get injured. It doesn't matter. The NFL rolls on. And, the way they work things, it's not so star dependent as basketball is, or even baseball to some degree. So I think that that's a little bit pie in the sky right now for the players. But if there is that amount of money sitting on the table for the owners, if they can add one more game, they may be a little bit more flexible on that. We'll have to see. More from Passan, and this is not Passan, but Breer, Albert Breer. Who's, come on, Andy, get yourself together here. This Albert Breer, who was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and it's on the Dak Prescott contract. Now, it seems like there's always discussion of the Dak Prescott contract on ESPN. It seems to fuel the entire network. These are two people who don't work for ESPN discussing it, but Prescott is going into the last year of his deal with the Cowboys, and there is no extension. And from all indications, it looks like both sides are willing to say, let's play it out, and if he's spectacular, we'll give him what he wants in free agency in the following year, or this will be his last year with the Cowboys. This is how Breer looks at the situation.
I sort of look at it similar to like where the Rams were at the end with Jared Goff, where they still liked Jared Goff, but they had wrestled with how they paid him and his value. And look, like, I think in a weird way, they've both been proven right, because the Rams went out and won a Super Bowl with Stafford, and now Goff has completely revitalized his career and changed the narrative that followed him around completely. So in that circumstance, both Goff and the Rams somehow wound up being right. I think that's possible in this situation too, where I don't think the Cowboys are wrestling with, can Dak Prescott, win in the playoffs for us? Can Dak Prescott be the answer for the next 5 years? Can Dak Prescott remain, within the top 10 or so quarterbacks in the league? I think it's more, do we want to have this number on our books affixed to this particular player? And that's why I think it was so hard the first time around, when they struggled and went through a franchise tag with him and got to a second franchise tag with him and finally signed him and cost themselves a lot of money in the process. It's almost like they're doing that all over again. Yeah. And, you do wonder, like, if there comes a point when they say, all right, enough's enough. We're going to just go into the year and let him play out the contract, knowing it's basically going to be impossible to franchise him after the year. So he's got almost a completely open road to free agency if he wants to take it.
Yeah, it almost feels like there's this mutual agreement that Dak's just going to play this year, and then let's see what happens when all's said and done. And if Dallas is good, maybe Mike McCarthy stays. If not, Bill Belichick come on
Yeah.
down?
It's weird because, like, I said this, I've said this over the last couple of months when people have asked me, like, which is the most urgent of these situations? And again, you have your quarterback, your coach, and your best player, that, I think all want new contracts, right? I think it actually is none of those three that's the most urgent. I think it's CD Lamb, because CD Lamb's the one who I think, showed over the last 2 months that he's willing to push the envelope on this. And he is going into a contract year, and the circumstances at his position have changed. And the market's exploded. I mean, there's a reason why the Dolphins were so aggressive with Jalen Waddle. The Texans were so aggressive with Nico Collins. The Lions were so aggressive with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like those teams did those deals early. The Eagles with Devontae Smith, like those teams did those deals early because they knew Justin Jefferson was coming down the pike. Now you have the Cowboys and Niners sitting over here, and it's like, sorry, price has changed. You know what I mean? Like, Justin Jefferson got paid, and now that number's 35, and maybe you don't have to give these guys 35 million, but they're going to want something closer to it than what Waddle and Smith and Nico Collins and Amon-Ra St. Brown got. So that's a complicated one. And, obviously he's not planning on showing up to camp, and has shown a willingness to go to the mat with the Cowboys to get what he wants.
That's Albert Breer, SI.com. Dan Patrick mentioned Bill Belichick, and I guess if Mike McCarthy doesn't get them to a Super Bowl this year, he's on his way out. Though Jerry Jones, it always looks like every year he's going to get rid of a coach. He doesn't fire coaches very often. They went through a bunch of them after Jimmy Johnson quit. Barry Switzer did deliver a Super Bowl, but things fell apart after that. As far as Belichick goes, and there's an interesting column written today in USA Today about here he is, Bill Belichick, not in a training camp for the first time since 1974. He went to the Baltimore Colts camp in 1975 as like a gopher kind of guy, and has worked his way up through, becoming defensive coordinator for Super Bowl teams with the Giants, head coaching with Cleveland, going back to New England, and then the Jets with Parcells, and then becoming head coach of the Patriots, and the rest is history. He's 15 wins away from Don Shula. He's 72 years old. Now, he's apparently drinking from the fountain of youth because he's been seen bicycling around Nantucket with his 23-year-old girlfriend. But, is it possible that he'll get the itch halfway through the season? Maybe he's got the itch now, and he did investigate going to the Atlanta Falcons. But at 72, clock is ticking. We've seen what's happened with the President of the United States. There's not going to be opportunities forever to go back to coaching. Could Bill Belichick, when there is a firing during the season, and they happen more frequently now that coaches get fired in the middle of the year, could he take on a job with another team I don't think he would go work for that crackpot David Tepper down in Carolina. But if that's open, might he be interested in doing it? Tepper fires coaches all the time. I think he's got a new one this year, but he may not last the season. Who knows? But he goes there just to add to the win total because he does, according to reports, he hasn't said it, but would like to catch Don Shula and needs 15 to do it. So, 72-year-old people, they're not lining up at your door to hire you. He's going to do some TV this year. TV is a good place to stay in the public eye, and there are a lot of coaches who benefit from that. The people see your opinions every week, and you get calls to become head coaches at some point. But is it possible that Bill Belichick wouldn't wait till the end of the year? Because the Cowboys, unless everything falls apart in the middle of the season, they're going to be in it. They're going to be a contender, and certainly I would think in the playoffs. But if there's another opening at midseason, might he be interested in doing it, knowing that he is 72 years old and he's not going to be able to be as picky as maybe he would have been 5 years ago, or things fell apart after Tom Brady left, and in 4 years he had a losing record and didn't win a playoff game, while Brady went on to win a Super Bowl. So I would keep an eye on that. And as crazy as it sounds, a Hall of Fame coach sitting on the sidelines doing TV, would he be tempted to come back and take a coaching job in the middle of the season if one should open up? And I would say it's fairly certain that we'll see at least one, probably several that will come open. Coming up, we'll get to some TV talk. What's happening with the deals that the NBA put together, and does TNT have a chance to stay in the game? It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. A little over a week ago, Ingrid Andress destroyed the national anthem as she did it before the Home Run Derby. 34 years ago today, Roseanne Barr destroyed the national anthem. She was not a professional singer, as Andress is, but it was disgraceful, and we'll look back on it coming up later this hour. Also, Jeff Passan, PTI yesterday, baseball trade deadline 1 week away. What might happen? What will the Orioles do? He's got information coming up on that. And also, ESPN has put out the top 25 NFL players of this century, I should say. And no surprise who's number one. But the omission is interesting, with John Harbaugh saying earlier this week that he believes Lamar Jackson can become the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. Got a long way to go, and it starts with 7 Super Bowl championships, which number one Brady has. We'll get to that. I am not being in any way critical of John Keim or anyone else who covers the Commanders. I think they all do a great job, and Keim is tremendous at it. He's been covering the team for like 30 years and knows as much as anybody about it. It's just that training camp is such now, especially where there's really a lack of hitting, that you're grabbing onto things that look really good and it gives you something to talk about. But, until you strap it on and you're playing games for real, not even exhibition games, it's you got to take these things with a grain of salt. So he put out a tweet a couple of minutes ago. He said, Jaden Daniels threw a perfect fade to Mitchell Tinsley at the back of the end zone in a 7-on-7 red zone work. Rhythm, Mariota had a couple of TD passes, but also had to extend so hard to know versus a rush if he had the time. I don't quite get all that. But again, they're not tackling, okay? They're not working out in pads. They're not scrimmaging. So you got to take everything with a grain of salt. But, this is the time of year that people get really excited about stuff. Also, you may have heard earlier this week that the Commanders are going to retire Darrell Green's number 28. I think it's an October game against Carolina, which is certainly deserved. Darrell Green spent 20 years as a cornerback here. There have been some amazing runs with, Brady, 23 years. I guess he would lead the pack. Jerry Rice, I think, played 20 years or close to it, maybe more. I don't know. Those are amazing numbers. Brett Favre, 20 years. These guys who play that long, it's remarkable. And certainly Darrell Green may be the most remarkable of all, in that he played a position where your speed is supposed to run out in like your early 30s, and he played till he was 42 years old. And I haven't seen him do it, but there are those who have watched him and say he can still run like 4.5 at the age of, I think he's like 63 now. So, just an unbelievable athlete, and just represented the organization so well here for 20 years and is very much revered. Well, for this organization, the old-timer is John Allen, who came here like yesterday. His rookie year was 2017. So what is this, year 7 that he's going into? And, well, that's a long time for this organization. It's not, it's not long for certain others, but he is the elder statesman. And it seems like he's been answering this question almost yearly since he got here. But, hey, okay, John, there's a new coaching staff, and you got yourself a new system here.
Man, I really think it's just about the little details. We're really focusing on the small stuff, to get off the first step, the first 6-inch step, your hands and your pad level, and just really repetition. So it's nothing groundbreaking that we're doing. It's just consistency and a mindset that we're playing with.
And how can that, at this stage of your career, too, how can that focus help you?
Man, I think it can help me a lot. When you look at the 49ers and what they were able to do with their defensive line, we're coaching a lot of the same things. So, I'm really excited for what we can do, and just excited to be out here.
Number 2 in seniority, Terry McLaurin, and he has been here since 2019. He is now on his, well, if you count the interim, 4th coaching staff over that period of time. Too many quarterbacks to count, But he gave his answer to the same thing about the new regime and what he's seen.
So I've experienced a lot in my going on 6 years here, and I could just at least speak to just this year, and I feel like the continuity from the top down is very clear what the objective is, bringing in good people who are really good at their job and are going to be competitors in what they do and bring their best selves to the building each and every day. I think that started from Mr. Harris and the ownership group, and I think that goes down to AP and DQ and our coordinators and the leaders on this team and our position coaches. So when you have that one voice, that one mission, I think it makes it very clear what the expectation is, and there's not a lot of deviation from that, because if you want to be a part of this team and this organization, you have to fit that mold or you probably won't be here. But I think the great thing about it is there's no favoritism. There's no, well, because you did this here or because you had this season last year. Like, we got guys and coaches from all over the place, but one thing they have is we have a lot of guys with experience, leadership, championship pedigree, and who are competitors who want to come and make this organization better and win together. And I think you can feel that juice, and then when you have the opportunity just to come out here and compete, that's what you love to do. You don't have to really focus on a lot of the off-field stuff we may have had, but you get to focus on football and how you get better and try to earn your spot on this team. So it's been really fun getting to know the guys. Like I said a few times, like even the first few days in the spring, we really didn't even talk a lot of football. We just got to know each other, which is new, you know what I mean? We've even mixed up the locker room where I'm sitting next to Forbes and some of the linemen, and usually you stay with your position group, but I think it helps just that continuity process a little quicker where you have those moments to spend time with guys you may not spend time with otherwise because they're not in your position room. So I could just tell we have a group of guys that are gelling well and enjoy spending time with one another, and also like to grind. And we set standards before ourselves as a team where that's what you have to hold up to if you want to be a part of this team. And I think that's great because it holds everybody accountable. Then it's on myself and it's on the other guys to hold each other accountable and to that standard. As long as that doesn't deviate, then you have a good chance to have success.
Yeah, I mean, they had signed a pact, actually, because some Navy SEALs had talked to the team, and they talked about having each other's backs and making it about their teammates. And so that's what he's talking about, where they have this agreement in place. We'll see what that leads to, but that's another step there on the leadership rung. And I don't think there's been anybody who's been here in the last 10 to 15 years that's shown the type of leadership that Terry McLaurin has. And on the field, he just was ranked 97 among the top 100 players in the league. For this organization, he's been even more valuable than that off the field, and discussed how he views leadership.
I would like to think I've been blessed with a leadership skill set that sometimes I kind of shied away from when I was a little younger, whether I was in college or even high school or even earlier in my career. I was just always a leader by example, which I think is great. I think, I just wanted to be somebody who was on time, who was accountable, did what I was supposed to do, and you could look at me as an example. Not that I'm perfect, but I just try to do things the right way. I try to be a pro. I try to set a good example for myself and my teammates. And as time has grown and you grow that respect, you have a little success, guys want to hear from you more. And I never wanted to be the type of vocal leader where I was someone who was just like a dictator or tearing guys down or just telling them what to do. But I think it's just more so speaking to the accountability aspect where you see guys maybe necessarily not doing what we set out to do or the standards that we set. You kind of check them on that. But I think that the awareness that we all have is not coming from a place of anger or a place of frustration. It's coming from a place of accountability, and we've all had a pledge with one another. We're not going to take that personally. And so for myself, I just tried to put myself in a situation where I speak up a little bit more. But even when I don't want to talk so much where it kind of just gets drowned out. I want to be someone where I say something, it's meaningful, it's impactful, and I think I've learned that happy middle, and I think it helps a lot when you have a lot of other leaders around, because I've learned from Zach, I've learned from Bobby Wagner, DQ sets a great example, and so you feel like that the weight of leadership doesn't fall all on you, but at the same time, I know what I bring to the table as a player and a leader, and I just try to set that standard. So, I really try to hold myself to a standard where not perfection, but on and off the field, I'm leading in a way that guys want to follow you, you know what I mean? And it's not just by your play, is how you communicate with them. I try to get to know the guys on the team, know about their families and things like that. So that's just that personal relationship goes a long way when it comes to leadership, because when you say something, they have more of a respect because they know where you're coming from.
As great as Terry McLaurin has been as a player, being one of the top receivers in the league. Maybe not the highest level, but maybe in the top 15, certainly in the top 20 in the league. I'm going to be more interested in what he is post-football. Is he going to be a coach, or is he going to run for office? I think he could be the mayor of D.C. He is really committed to being a leader on this team. Everything he does screams professional. And I'll be very curious to see what I know he's talked to Magic Johnson about being an entrepreneur, and maybe that's what he's going to pursue. But boy, he is very, very impressive. As impressive to me, anyway, off the field as he is on the field. Anyway, they're off and running, and Jonathan Allen on what is yet again a new day as a member of this football team. Now I guess he's going into his 8th year now. With the team with 3 different names.
Oh, it definitely feels like the first day of school. The first day of training camp is always exciting and fun to get out here with the guys for the first time. Yeah, man, I'm just really trying to go out there and put my best foot forward moving forward, and, we're excited about what the season could be.
You guys have done training camp a bunch of different ways since you've been here, but being in Ashburn, staying in the team hotel, what can you guys get out of that? What are you hoping that you can – what do you hope that adds to the team or to training camp?
Whenever you stay at a hotel for training camp, it really helps with team bonding. Guys spending a lot of time in close proximity, because when you're in the NFL, after the season or after the day's done, I got a wife that I got to go to. Other guys have kids that they have to go home to. But when you're in the hotel, you spend a lot more time together off the field than you normally would, and that just helps with bonding.
Yeah, it's nice though that the hotel is Lansdowne, a luxury resort. Things have changed a lot in training camp, but they are doing that this year, and I think a lot of it had to do with the team facilities, which they are fixing up. They're spending a lot of time and money on that, but they want the players to feel a little bit better about the circumstance that they're dealing with. They did some renovations out at the park. They took out that ridiculous old artificial turf field and so forth. So anyway, off and running in Ashburn, and we'll continue to provide updates as they become available. I know Bram has been out there, the voice of the team, and you can hear him in the afternoon from 3 to 5 as he will tell you everything that he's observed that's been going on in training camp. Meantime, ESPN has put out, and this is one of the things you do at this sort of dead time of the year, a list of the top 25 players of the last century, since the calendar flipped over to the year 2000, since the new millennial. And they have also additions, the 5 that were just outside the top 25. Now, most of these guys are now retired. There's a few there that are still active. But just curious to me that Lamar Jackson was not among them, and you've got his coach saying he believes he can become the best player in the history of the NFL. Okay, 16 offensive guys, 9 defensive players. Here's the list. Tom Brady, number 1, of course, 7 Super Bowl championships, 3 MVPs, 15 times a Pro Bowler. Patrick Mahomes, number 2. I mean, with an incomplete career. Yes, he's got 3 Super Bowl championships. He's won a couple of MVPs. He's been to the Pro Bowl 6 times. But the number 2 player of the 21st century, you might make a case for somebody else, though as big a value as the quarterback position is, sort of makes sense, number 2. Number 3, defensive player, Aaron Donald. Short and sweet career. Leave him wanting more. Played 10 years. Made the Pro Bowl all 10 years, 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, won a Super Bowl with the Rams. He's number 3. Peyton Manning, number 4. He's the first Hall of Famer on the list, though the top 3 will certainly be Hall of Famers. 2-time Super Bowl winner, 5-time MVP. 5-time MVP. Brady won 3, Manning won 5. 14 times in the Pro Bowl. Randy Moss, wide receiver, number 6. 6-time Pro Bowl, 156 touchdown catches, which is number 2 to Jerry Rice. Calvin Johnson, number 6. So the 5 and 6 players, both wide receivers. Calvin Johnson didn't win anything playing for Detroit, made the Pro Bowl 6 times. Seems high to have him at 6, but that's where Calvin Johnson is. J.J. Watt, number 7, and he has already called Houston and said, yeah, if you need me late in the year, I might be ready to go. He looks some pictures of him online. He's in incredible shape. Still, a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, number 7. Ray Lewis, number 8, in the Hall of Fame. Won 2 Super Bowls, made the Pro Bowl 12 times. He's 8. Aaron Rodgers, still active. So here's our second active player on the list, also a quarterback, number 9, 4-time MVP, 10 times in the Pro Bowl, won 1 Super Bowl. Darrelle Revis, number 10. He's certainly figured out how to make the money, that's for sure. 7 times in the Pro Bowl. He's in the Hall of Fame, won a Super Bowl with the Patriots. Ed Reed, number 11, a safety, number 11. He's 9-time Pro Bowler, 1-time Super Bowl. Ed Reed, number 11. Charles Woodson, number 12, also in the Hall of Fame, won a Super Bowl with the Green Bay Packers and made the Pro Bowl 9 times. Rob Gronkowski in the top 15. I mean, he's goofy, but obviously the voters think he's that good. I don't know if I'd have Gronk that high, but Gronk is at number 13, won 4 Super Bowls with 3 with the Patriots and 1 with Tampa Bay, made the Pro Bowl 5 times. Travis Kelce, still active, number 14, 3-time Super Bowl, 9-time Pro Bowls. Would you put Gronk ahead of Travis Kelce? I don't know. I don't know if I would do that. I certainly might flip those. Drew Brees, 3rd quarterback on the list. He will be in the Hall of Fame when he becomes eligible. 13 Pro Bowls, made 1 Super Bowl, won the Super Bowl. Troy Polamalu, number 16, 2-time Super Bowl champ, 8-time Pro Bowler. He's at 16. Brett Favre, 17, 3 times the MVP. Made 297 consecutive starts over his career. Here's the first running back, and this shows you really how the NFL has changed this century. Because for many years, maybe you could still debate this now, the question was, who's the greatest football player of all time? Some might say Jerry Rice. Some might say a quarterback. Maybe it's Brady. Maybe it's Montana. But Jim Brown was in the discussion. Jim Brown was always in the discussion about running back. Adrian Peterson, the last running back to win an MVP, never won a Super Bowl. He's 18 on the list. 17 of the top 25 players of this century rank higher than Adrian Peterson, who is the last running back to win an MVP. How about that? Michael Strahan in the Hall of Fame, 7 times a Pro Bowler, Defensive Player of the Year once, won a Super Bowl with the Giants. LaDainian Tomlinson, there's your second running back. He's at number 20, made the Pro Bowl 5 times in the Hall of Fame. Marshall Faulk, so you got a little run on running backs here, number 21, 7 times a Pro Bowler. Then you got Warren Sapp at 22. He's in the Hall of Fame. Joe Thomas, offensive lineman. Let's see. Yeah, there's your first offensive lineman on the list. He's at 23. Participated in 10,363 consecutive snaps. So that might be a record as well. At least that's the record they kept track of. 10 times in the Pro Bowl. Tony Gonzalez, one of the maybe the greatest tight end of all time. Boy, I might put Tony Gonzalez at 24 is low. You might make the case that he's better than Gronk and better than Travis Kelce. That seems low for me. Tony Gonzalez at 14. And I don't think I'd put Derek Brooks at 25. He did make the Pro Bowl 11 times, was Defensive Player of the Year. Seems high. Jonathan Ogden, offensive lineman for the Ravens. Tony Fitzgerald from the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. Larry Fitzgerald. Orlando Pace, who played for the Rams. Marvin Harrison, who's wide receiver with the Colts. And then T.O. is number 30. So there you go. 30 players listed, the top 25, and you don't have Lamar Jackson. Will he get there? Yeah, he might. He's only 27 years old, has won 2 MVPs, but on that list. I think Gonzalez is way low, and I don't think Derek Brooks necessarily belongs on the list, but the others are hard to argue with Tom Brady. Certainly, you have to say Tom Brady's the greatest player of the 21st century and maybe the greatest player of all time. Do a little baseball next. Jeff Passan of ESPN was on the Tony and Mike show, PTI, yesterday, and gave some ideas as to what might happen at the trade deadline a week from today. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So how can you tell that George Steinbrenner is not alive anymore? The Yankees, since mid-June, have been terrible. Yankees were looking like they were going to run away with things. After they beat the Red Sox on June 14th, they were 50-22. Since then, so that's only, 5 weeks ago? Less than 6 weeks ago? Since then, they are 10-22. Meaning, in the first 2.5 months of the season, they lost 22 games. In the last 6 weeks, they have lost 22 games. Now, they can be thankful that the Orioles have been really bad lately, and the Orioles are still only a game and a half up on them. But the Yankees have really underperformed. They've blown some leads, and you got, Aaron Judge is having a great year. He's got 35 home runs. Soto's having a great year. What's going on with them? And after they lost to the Mets last night, got blown out 12-3, Aaron Boone, the manager, said, we got to play better. He said, we have it right in front of us. We're really a good team that has played essy of late. We need to be better. I'm not going to define stretch, this or that. We got to win, right? And we're right there. We're watching other teams struggle around us. How are they right there? They're losing, and they're getting blown out by the crosstown Mets. We know we got to be better. We're pissed off in there. We got a lot of pride, a lot of expectations. So stretch, slump, recent, I don't give an S. We got to play better the rest of the way. George Steinbrenner would have gotten rid of this guy. If Billy Martin could breathe, if he could fog a mirror, Billy Martin would be managing this team right now, or somebody like that. And they are apparently a mess right now. They have not been able to match what they did in the first half of the season. And the crazy thing is, Garrett Cole, who won the Cy Young last year, was out for that part of the season when they were 50-22. He comes back, and he hasn't pitched well. And the team itself, he doesn't pitch every game, obviously. The team itself has been terrible. So, we'll see what plays out at the trade deadline. They, I would think, are going to be buyers. And then the question is, what are the Orioles going to do to match? There's one name out there that both teams would be interested in, and it's Tarek Skubal from the Detroit Tigers. And yesterday, Jeff Passan was on PTI, and they asked him, does he expect Skubal to be traded by the Tigers?
It's likelier, Tony, that I think he stays with the Detroit Tigers. They feel like they're building something really good there. And it's not just Tarek Skubal. They've got Jackson Jobe, who's the best pitching prospect in the minor leagues. And more than anything, when you have a true ace, and I do believe that Tarek Skubal is a true ace at this point, you just don't trade him. It's not something that teams do, particularly teams that are on the upswing. And while other organizations around baseball believe that the Tigers could absolutely make out like bandits here if they decided to do so and maybe position themselves even better going forward, the idea of trading a superstar is a really, really hard thing to do. You saw what happened when the Boston Red Sox did it with Mookie Betts. You saw what happened when the Yankees got Juan Soto, and their offense at least became somewhat respectable accordingly. To go and deal Skubal at this point, it could happen if there is a Godfather offer, but the likelihood at this point is just not all that high.
Here. That's what I like to hear, Jeff. Something in favor of starting pitcher and ace. Beyond Skubal, though, what one or two players do you think of note might be dealt, and who wants them?
We got to focus here on the Chicago White Sox, Mike. Garrett Crochet, especially if Skubal is not going to be available, is the best starting pitcher on the market. He's also a guy who comes with some complications. He's thrown more innings this season than he has in his previous 4 years combined. So there are questions about how much are you going to be able to pitch him and keep him healthy for the 2 years he has remaining after this season until he's a free agent. And the Dodgers are in on him. The Orioles make a ton of sense for him. The price is going to be really high, though, and the White Sox have indicated that they may be willing to hold on to him and move him this offseason as opposed to now. And they've said the same about Luis Robert, who is the best bat on the market right now. There are just no hitters. Like this is a class that looked like it was going to have Pete Alonso, and then the Mets got hot. That looked like at least a few other guys, maybe Vladimir Guerrero Jr. was going to be available. The Blue Jays say he is not at this point. And so all the attention has gone on to Robert. He plays center field. He hits home runs. He is a dynamic player when he's healthy. And yeah, the Dodgers are in there too, and the Phillies make a ton of sense, though they're so good right now, they may not even need Luis Robert to make it to the World Series.
Well, I'm sure Luis Robert would probably like to get off the South Side at this point with that team, but let's go to contenders. Which contenders, Jeff, need to make a move? I realize there's a scarcity of bats, but who out there needs to make a move of the serious contenders?
Guess who has bats? It's the Baltimore Orioles. And what they are missing right now is starting pitching depth. They lost 3 guys to Tommy John surgery this year, and while the Corbin Burns trade has been an absolute boon for them to this point, they would love to have somebody to pair with him at the top of their rotation come postseason time. And the thing is, if you're the Orioles, you can take so many different routes. If they want to trade a prospect, they have one of the best farm systems in baseball. If they want to trade a veteran guy, maybe Ryan Mountcastle at first base or Cedric Mullins in center field, they have the ability to do that too. So the world is Baltimore's oyster right now. And it's just a question of how much are they willing to invest in this particular season with the knowledge that 2025 and 26 and beyond are still going to be very fruitful and bountiful for that organization.
All right, Jeff, we will get you out of here on this, and it is a tone change. It is not about the trade deadline. It's about Mike Trout. He left his first rehab game with knee soreness. What do you make of that?
It's just sad because Mike Trout, over the first decade of his career, Tony, was the closest thing I saw to someone who was at Barry Bonds' level playing. And this is just, I've been covering baseball for 21 years now, and just looking at the best players I have ever seen, it's Bonds, it's Albert Pujols, it's Shohei Ohtani, it's Aaron Judge, and it's Mike Trout. And I don't think people necessarily appreciated Trout for what he was because the Angels stunk and because he made one playoff series and got swept out of it. But he had power, he had speed, he was everything. And I'm just hopeful that the rest of his 30s are a lot better than the earlier years have been, because seeing Mike Trout when he is at his best is seeing a baseball player who frankly looks like he was made in a video game. That's how good Trout was, and I hope after all the injuries, that's how good Trout can be again.
You hope so. But I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. By the way, it's Jeff Passan on PTI yesterday. I was talking about Trout the other day, and he's got Hall of Fame numbers, certainly. But would you think of him as a Hall of Famer? You probably wouldn't. He's probably the most invisible superstar we have in sports, right? You see the superstars in the NFL. You know who they are. You see the superstars certainly in the NBA. But here's a guy who's been playing for a team that's been mostly bad. He's played in exactly 3 playoff games in his career, and with the expansion of the playoffs, that's totally different. I mean, I've heard the Ernie Banks comparisons, but when Ernie Banks played, I think all of his career, if not most of it, I guess the 69 season was the first year that they had divisions, and they lost out to the Mets. They blew that big lead, and that was probably his best chance to get to the World Series. But it's a lot different now. There's so many different levels of playoffs and so many teams that make the playoffs that a guy who's played in 3 playoff games in his entire career and plays on the West Coast where nobody sees him, and then on top of that is hurt all the time, as he has been in recent years. The last 3 or 4 years have been a complete health disaster for him. And so when you look at the career of Mike Trout, yes, the numbers say Hall of Fame, but when he goes in, and it's possible his career could end sooner rather than later. He's 32 years old. You hope that he can continue to play. But when he got that contract of over $400 million, I don't think anybody said he's not worth it. But what has been produced by him and his teammates have certainly been under the value of the deal. And he's been obliterated by the Shohei Ohtani deal. Understand that. But Ohtani is producing. He can't pitch right now for the Dodgers. They expect him to pitch again next year after he recovers from the Tommy John surgery. But he had a home run the other night, which was a moonshot. I mean, it was like 428 or something like that at Dodger Stadium. Whereas Mike Trout, it's not like when he plays he isn't good, but he doesn't play. He's hurt all the time. And now he's trying to make it back from a knee injury and was supposed to play 5 innings the other night. Wound up only playing 2 because of it. And when we write the story of the Mike Trout career, it's like, I don't know. How do you look at it? Like Bryce Harper, when he signed with the Phillies, when he rejected the Nationals' offer of $300 million, and Scott Boras went shopping and shopping and shopping because he wanted to make him the highest paid player of all time, wanted to get him past Giancarlo Stanton, who had the $325 million deal, so he got him $330 from the Phillies. And Harper was recruiting Trout, who's from Philadelphia. Like, he's a big Eagle fan. He has season tickets and goes to all their games in the offseason. He was trying to get him, and here he is. At that point, Harper was the highest paid player, but not for long, because Trout went almost $100 million past him. And a lot of people said, well, he's a much better player than Bryce Harper. But Harper plays. He gets hurt, but he plays. Trout, man, that's a really... When the story of his career is written, it will be very difficult for the modern people to decipher this. Ted Williams played in only one World Series. He got to one. As I say, Banks never did. There are certain players who had careers that were terrific careers. They just didn't include postseason play when there was limited postseason play, when only 2 teams got to the postseason in the World Series, which was the case up until 1969. And really until maybe the late 70s, early 80s, where they started adding teams. We didn't even have the wild card until the 90s. So it was just more divisions and more teams that would make up the rounds of the playoffs. But I don't know, the Trout, with all the playoff possibilities available, and only to have played 3 playoff games in his entire career and to be hurt as much as he is, it's a hard thing to get your head around. All right, that's enough for me. We've got Orioles baseball coming up at 11:30 today. Tony tomorrow. I'll see you as well at 9 a.m.